Imagine hitting your late 30s or maybe your early 40s. You're at the top of your game, your career is finally stable, you've built this life that you generally love, and then suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, you start experiencing this just blinding rage.
Yeah, that 0 to 60 fury.
Exactly. Like fury over something completely trivial, a dropped spoon in the kitchen, right? And your heart is racing, your thoughts are all cloudy, and you genuinely start to think that you're losing your mind.
It is a terrifying scenario. And I mean, for a massive portion of the population, it's an absolute reality that just gets entirely swept under the rug.
Well, I'm your host, and joined as always by a resident clinical expert. We're doing a deep dive today into a really fascinating stack of clinical notes and service details. And the mission today is to reveal something profound about that exact scenario.
Because if you are experiencing that, you are absolutely not losing your mind.
Right. You are likely entering this invisible multi-year biological transition that the medical world routinely just misses. Today's deep dive is all about perimenopausal depression.
Which is such a critical topic.
It really is. And I want to speak directly to you listening right now. Because whether you are a woman approaching this stage of life or, you're someone who has friends, family members, colleagues who are understanding this highly misunderstood window for mood changes, is an absolute game changer. It changes how we perceive and support each other.
And that support, it really has to start with dismantling a very specific, very stubborn idea. Our source material points to this one central thought process that basically traps people from getting help.
Oh, the age myth.
Yes. It's this underlying belief of, I am too old to suddenly develop depression. I've made it this far. My mental health is pretty much set.
Right, because we tend to think of sudden onset mental health crises as something that happens to, teenagers or young adults figuring out life.
Exactly. But the clinical reality completely shatters that assumption. The years leading up to menopause actually represent one of the highest risk windows for severe mood changes in a woman's entire life.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if this is really one of the highest risk windows in a whole lifespan, how on earth is it flying completely under the radar? Modern medicine tracks everything. How does a massive biological shift just go unnoticed by patients and their doctors?
It really comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of the timeline. Pop culture has basically conditioned us to believe that menopause is this sudden event that happens in your 50s.
Right, you get gray hair and buy a hand fan.
Exactly. You hit a certain age, your period stops, you get a hot flash, and that's the whole story. But perimenopause, the transitional phase that leads up to that point, it can start much, much earlier.
How early are we talking?
Well, according to the data we are looking at, the underlying hormonal shifts can actually begin in a woman's late 30s or her 40s. And this phase, it can last for years.
For years? But I'm still hung up on the invisibility of it all. Even if it lasts for a decade, wouldn't the doctor notice something shifting?
You'd think so, but they miss it because of the sneaky order in which the symptoms actually appear. And this is one of the most crucial insights from our clinical sources today. The psychiatric symptoms, meaning the intense mood changes, the severe anxiety, the cognitive shifts, they frequently arrive long before the physical symptoms.
Wait, so the depression and the rage hit before the hot flashes?
Yeah.
Before the irregular cycles even start?
In many cases, yes, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
The brain is just incredibly sensitive to shifting hormones. So it often reacts way before the reproductive system shows obvious external signs of slowing down. But usually doctors are just waiting for those physical markers.
Like the missed cycles.
Right. They wait for missed cycles or hot flashes as their trigger to finally bring up the concept of perimenopause. So because those classic physical red flags are completely missing early on, both the patient and the medical professional just entirely misinterpret what is happening internally.
That invisible onset makes so much sense now. The body isn't sounding the traditional alarm bells, but the engine driving the whole system is already shifting into chaos.
Chaos is the perfect word for it.
So let's talk about that engine. Let's talk about the biological mechanism at play here, which of course brings us to the hormones.
And this requires a major shift in how we visualize aging. Because the standard, almost comforting assumption is that as a woman approaches menopause, her estrogen levels just steadily, quietly decline.
Like a smooth ramp downwards.
Exactly. You picture a predictable slope downward until the levels just taper off.
But the clinical notes paint a very different picture. Because if it were a smooth slope, the mood wouldn't be destabilizing so violently, right?
Spot on. The destabilization is not caused by the decline itself. It is caused by the fluctuation.
The fluctuation.
Yes, during perimenopause, estrogen levels don't just drop, they spike erratically and then plummet over and over again.
So it's not a gentle slide down a hill at all. It's a roller coaster. I mean, it's like the difference between driving a car and slowly, gently pressing the brakes to come to a smooth stop at a red light versus someone just slamming on the gas and then slamming on the brakes at completely random intervals.
Oh, that's exactly it.
No wonder the brain gets whiplash.
That gas and brake analogy hits the nail on the head because the human brain, just on a fundamental neurological level, it craves predictability. It wants homeostasis.
Right.
So when it doesn't get that stability, when it is constantly jerked around by sudden hormonal spikes and crashes, the entire regulatory system is just thrown off balance.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though. Because if every single woman who reaches this age goes through this hormonal roller coaster eventually, why does it completely derail one woman's life while another woman just, gets a few mood swings and moves on? There has to be a biological difference in who gets hit the hardest.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, there is a very significant difference, and our sources highlight specific high-risk profiles for this.
Okay, who is at the highest risk?
Women who already have a history of PMDD, that's premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or a history of postpartum depression, or even just prior major depressive episodes, they are at a severely elevated risk during perimenopause.
So why them specifically? Like, what is happening in their biology that makes them so vulnerable to this?
It really comes down to neurological sensitivity. Some brains are simply more sensitive to steroidal hormone shifts than others are.
Interesting.
Yeah, so if a woman's brain already reacted poorly to the hormonal shifts of just a normal monthly cycle, as we see with PMDD, or maybe the massive hormonal crash after giving birth, then her system is going to be incredibly vulnerable to the erratic, multi-year fluctuations of perimenopause.
Because her brain is already wired to ring the alarm bell when estrogen fluctuates.
Exactly. The pathway is already there.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that alarm bell doesn't just sound like, a little bit of sadness. The biological roller coaster creates a very specific, intense, and frankly, often terrifying symptom picture. The clinical sources detail these symptoms, and we really need to walk through them because they paint a vivid reality.
We definitely do. Getting granular on these symptoms is essential because they rarely look like textbook depression.
Right. First on the list from the notes is new onset anxiety. Or, and this seems particularly cruel, anxiety that a woman previously had well managed, maybe for years, which suddenly just spirals completely out of control.
Yes, the return of anxiety is a huge one.
Then there is the irritability or anger that feels entirely disproportionate to the situation. Going back to that idea of 0 to 60 rage over a dropped spoon.
And we also see pervasive low mood and profound cognitive complaints. Patients usually describe this as just brain fog.
Oh, the brain fog.
Yeah, they can't find the right word in a meeting, they lose their train of thought mid-sentence, and they just feel like their processing speed has absolutely plummeted.
And then you add disrupted sleep to all of that. And the sources are very clear that sleep disruption isn't just like an annoying side effect. It acts as a massive amplifier for everything else.
Because sleep is the foundational pillar of emotional regulation. I mean, think about it. When you have a brain that is already dealing with the whiplash of fluctuating estrogen, surging anxiety, and brain fog, and then you routinely deprive that brain of rest.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It is. The exhaustion becomes bone deep. It compounds every single other symptom on that list until the system simply cannot cope anymore.
So what does this actually look like in the real world? Like when you have a woman in her late 30s or early 40s dealing with this disproportionate anger, this terrifying brain fog, and just relentless exhaustion, how is society generally responding to her?
Society usually responds with what we can call the tragedy of misattribution.
The tragedy of misattribution. That's a heavy phrase.
It is, but it's accurate. Because the physical markers of menopause aren't there yet, these severe psychiatric symptoms are constantly just written off. They are minimized as, oh, just the stress of a demanding career, or the inevitable exhaustion of raising kids.
Or people just wave their hands and say, oh, it's just your hormones, as if that somehow dismisses the validity of the suffering.
Exactly.
Or they blame it on aging. They say, well, you're 40 now. Of course you're tired and cranky. Welcome to midlife.
And that casual dismissal, it carries a devastating psychological cost. Women spend years being told by their families, their colleagues, and sometimes even their medical providers that this intense level of suffering is just ordinary midlife stress.
So what does this all mean for the person going through it? If you are told over and over that your intense daily struggle is just ordinary, you're going to draw a really dark conclusion.
You inevitably conclude that the problem is you. Yeah. If everyone else is supposedly handling ordinary midlife just fine, and you are falling apart, you decide that something is deeply wrong with your character. You start to believe you are just weak, or you're a failing mother, or you're suddenly incompetent at a job you used to excel at.
That is just such a heavy burden to carry. The shame of thinking your biology is actually a personality flaw.
Which is exactly why simply naming the problem is such a massive relief for these patients. Realizing that a sudden, disproportionate rage isn't a moral failing, that it's a documented biochemical fluctuation that is the crucial first step toward healing. It finally removes the shame from the equation.
But let's be honest, naming the problem is only half the battle. Like, a diagnosis is validating, sure, but it doesn't stop the panic attacks. The next logical step is figuring out how to actually treat this safely and effectively.
Absolutely. And for that, we have to look at the collaborative treatment playbook outlined in our sources.
And I mean, just a quick pause here for a mandatory compliance check, because we are diving deep into clinical notes and treatment protocols today, but we're not doctors, right?
But no medical advice here.
Exactly. We're not prescribing hormone therapy or giving medical advice. Every person's biology is unique, so diagnosis and treatment always require a licensed clinician. Plus, the examples we are discussing are composites based on the source data. They aren't real client stories. But looking at what the evidence-based playbook actually shows us, the therapeutic directions are very specific.
They are very specific. The clinical data strongly supports cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, and interpersonal therapy for addressing the mood and anxiety symptoms. And this is typically paired with highly targeted sleep interventions to just de-amplify that broader symptom picture.
I am curious about the mechanism here, though, because if the root cause is a fluctuating hormone, which is a biological, chemical reality, how does a psychological tool like talk therapy actually fix the problem? CBT doesn't stop estrogen from dropping, right?
You are spot on. CBT does absolutely nothing to change the hormonal output of the ovaries.
Right.
But what it does do is rewire the secondary reaction. When estrogen drops abruptly, it can trigger a very real physical panic response in the nervous system. The heart races, the chest tightens. Now, a brain untrained by therapy will interpret that physical sensation catastrophically.
Well, I think I'm dying.
Exactly. It thinks, I am having a heart attack, or I am losing my mind. And that thought triggers a massive release of adrenaline and cortisol, which spirals into a full-blown behavioral meltdown.
So the therapy intercepts the spiral.
Yes, precisely. CBT teaches the brain to catch that initial hormone-driven physical sensation, objectively label it for what it actually is, and self-soothe before the psychological catastrophe takes over. It builds the mental scaffolding to withstand the biological earthquake.
Okay, that makes complete sense. But the sources also emphasize that therapy alone isn't always enough. There are pharmacologic options available, but there is this major emphasis on coordinating that with a medical provider. Why is this coordination so heavily stressed for perimenopausal depression compared to, say, just standard generalized anxiety?
It's because of the uniquely dual-natured root of this presentation. It is profoundly biochemical, driven by that estrogen roller coaster we talked about, and it is profoundly psychological, dealing with the fallout of the anxiety, the anger, and all that self-blame.
It's like trying to fix a house with a leaky roof. The therapist can help you mop up the water, repair the drywall, teach you how to manage the internal environment that's the mental scaffolding. But if your medical provider doesn't actually patch the hole in the biological roof where the hormonal chaos is pouring in, you're just going to keep flooding. You need a two-front approach.
That is a fantastic way to visualize it. Treating the psychological symptoms without acknowledging the shifting body chemistry, or simply throwing hormones at the body without addressing the shattered confidence and the anxiety, it just leaves the patient incredibly vulnerable. In this specific arena, collaboration between mental health and medical providers is the absolute gold standard of care.
Okay, it is genuinely empowering to know that this collaborative, evidence-based treatment exists. But let's bring a dose of reality to this for a second. If a woman is already drowning in brain fog, exhaustion, and sudden rage, asking her to hunt down a culturally competent therapist who also specializes in perimenopause, it feels like handing an anchor to someone who is actively treading water.
It really does.
Access is just a massive barrier. How do people actually get this kind of help without burning out entirely?
The logistics of access are historically the breaking point for care, but our sources highlight a fascinating case study in solving this exact problem, specifically within the state of Georgia.
Yes. We are looking at the data for Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC. This is a telehealth therapy practice, and the way they are structurally dismantling those access barriers is really worth analyzing.
The most immediate structural fix they apply is to geographic isolation.
Right, because they serve all 159 counties in Georgia.
And think about why that matters for a population dealing with profound exhaustion. By utilizing a 100% telehealth, I pay compliant model, they remove the commute, they remove the waiting room, and all the scheduling gymnastics.
You don't have to fight traffic for an hour just to cry in an office.
Exactly. A woman living in a rural county, maybe hours away from a major metropolitan medical center, she suddenly has the exact same access to a specialist as someone living in downtown Atlanta. Telehealth doesn't just offer convenience here. For perimenopausal women, it conserves incredibly scarce energy.
And the team they've built to deliver this care is substantial. I mean, we aren't talking about a solo practitioner with a wait list 6 months long. The sources note they have over 15 licensed therapists, including licensed clinical social workers, licensed professional counselors, and licensed marriage and family therapists.
They cover a lot of ground.
They really do. They offer individual therapy, couples therapy, family therapy, and even teen therapy for ages 13 and up, plus life coaching.
What really stands out in the clinical notes, though, is the deliberate focus on a diverse, culturally competent team.
Why is cultural competence specifically so vital when we are talking about perimenopause?
Because the way we experience aging, mental health, and the medical system itself is deeply influenced by our cultural background. A culturally competent provider understands the specific stigmas around mental health in different communities.
That makes sense.
They understand that a woman of color, for instance, might face entirely different dismissals in a medical setting than a white woman would. The therapist has to understand those nuances to effectively build that mental scaffolding we discussed earlier.
They cast a very wide specialized net because beyond perimenopause, they also specialize in anxiety, depression, trauma and PTSD, grief, relationships, and just general stress. But frankly, having a great, accessible team means nothing if the patient can't afford to turn the computer on for the session.
Very true.
I want to look closely at the financial data in our sources, because this is where the traditional healthcare model usually locks people out.
The financial structuring is arguably the most critical piece of the CHC model.
Usually, seeing a highly specialized mental health professional out of pocket can run upwards of like $150 to $250 a session. But for Medicaid patients using CHC, the copay is $0.
It's incredible.
And not a typo,
Yeah.
$0.
Removing the financial barrier entirely for a vulnerable population ensures that care isn't just a luxury reserved for the wealthy.
And for those on commercial plans, it remains incredibly structured for accessibility. They accept major providers, Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, and Humana. And with those plans, the out-of-pocket cost is typically between just $10 and $40 per session.
When you analyze that model, combining statewide telehealth reach to solve the geography and fatigue problems with financial price points that solve the economic problem, it completely changes the landscape of who is allowed to heal.
It takes the whole theory of collaborative care and makes it an actual reachable reality. If you are listening to this and you realize that you, or maybe someone you love, needs to access this specific kind of support in Georgia, the sources provide their direct contact information. You can reach out to them by calling 404-832-0102. You can visit their website at chetshitherapy.com, or you can email them directly at support@jnshatherapy.com. Again, that is Coping and Healing Counseling.
Tangible resources are the bridge between simply raising awareness and actually changing patient outcomes.
So let's pull all these threads together. The mission of this deep dive was to shine a light into a very murky, often misunderstood chapter of life. The core takeaway is this. If you or a woman in your life is navigating her late 30s or 40s and is suddenly broadsided by uncharacteristic, spiraling anxiety, sudden flashes of disproportionate rage, or a brain fog that just refuses to lift, it is not a character flaw. It is not just ordinary midlife stress that you are somehow failing to handle.
It is highly likely the unseen, chaotic roller coaster of perimenopause. The biology is shifting, and the brain is feeling the turbulence long before the body shows the classic physical signs.
And most importantly, you do not have to just white-knuckle your way through a decade of a hidden transition. The collaborative treatments exist, they are highly effective, and through models like the one we explored today, they are actually accessible.
This exploration raises a broader final question, though, and it's something I really want to leave everyone pondering today.
Oh, I love a good final thought.
We've spent our time today focusing on the individual experience, right? How one woman navigates this transition. But what if we zoom out? We as a society openly discuss, accommodate, and understand the neurological and hormonal impacts of teenage puberty.
We do.
We expect the mood swings, we educate our kids about them, and we give teenagers a degree of structural grace. So, if society applied that exact same understanding to the neurological impacts of perimenopause, how would our world fundamentally shift? How would our workplace leave policies, our routine medical screenings, and our basic family dynamics have to evolve to truly support women during this multi-year transition, rather than just expecting them to suffer in silence?
Wow. That is a profound lens to look through. Just imagine a world where a 40-year-old woman is given the same structural grace and medical curiosity as a 14-year-old going through puberty. It wouldn't just change healthcare, it would completely rewrite the cultural narrative of midlife. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We strongly encourage you to take this information and share it with someone in your life who might be secretly struggling, thinking they are all alone. Because when the medical system's traditional red flags aren't waving, we have to rely on each other to see the invisible struggles and point the way toward help. Take care of yourselves, keep asking questions, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.